Hi, I'm Jeremy Crosby.
And I'm Nick Boucher. We're your hosts for the program that's all about your city, Talking Fitchburg.
Every weekday, we pull together the news, events, and information you need to stay on top of what's happening in the city of Fitchburg.
Find Talking Fitchburg on cable TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and our live stream on the web. Plus, you can find all our headlines and stories on Facebook, YouTube, and our video on demand service. This is your city.
Keep up with Talking Fitchburg and the issues affecting you and your neighbors.
Want to know what's happening in your city? Get Notify Me messages from the City of Fitchburg. Visit fitchburgwi.gov on your computer or mobile device and select the big Notify Me button on the left. Enter your email and/or phone number, whichever is best for you to get notifications. Scroll down the list and select all the topics you're interested in to receive email or text messages about. You'll be notified every time one of your topics is updated. Sign up for Notify Me, one more way to keep up with your Fitchburg government.
Good afternoon. It is 5:31, and I'm calling this June 10th, 2025 Finance Committee meeting to order. Present is Mike Aladuse and myself. Alder Gerhardt is absent this evening with excuse. Moving on to the agenda here. First item is approval of the minutes of the draft May 27th meeting.
Move to approve.
All right, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the draft minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It is unanimous. Item 3 on the agenda, public appearances for non-agenda items. There is no one in chambers, and I don't see any sheets of paper here, so I presume we are going to move on to agenda item 4, the Finance Director report. Miss Misty Dodge.
Thank you. So I'll start with, included in the packet is the April Treasurer's Report. One big thing to note is the slug investment that was authorized. So we hired Ellers as an investment advisor. They then helped us get invested in slugs, which is a tax-exempt vehicle for our 2021A bond issuance. That is shown up there at the $2.2 million. It's at the bottom of the second page of the Treasurer's Report with the purple heading. Other than that, I'll pause if there's questions.
I just had a couple of comments. It looks like the interest on temporary investments continues to overperform.
Absolutely.
And there's also an item, accident recoveries, currently at about 4.7 times the budget. Do I even want to know what we're dealing with there?
So that would be generally when people hit poles, whether it's streetlight poles or traffic light poles or something like that. We then have to replace it and we bill out the insurance. I'll say not all of that is likely recoverable. Some of it is probably bad debt, but we do show it as we go.
Okay, so it's residents of, or I guess people out and about, the public, destroying city property.
Generally traffic incidents.
And would it also include like city staff driving into a pole, the vehicle and the pole damage then?
So not usually, because we have the internal service fund where we record all of our insurance, and that would be under a liability, right? It's the city's liability policy that would often pick up some of that. So not usually. This amount that you see in the general fund would be amounts we bill to other parties.
Okay, always damage to city property.
To city property, yep.
Thanks for the clarification.
Of course.
Are we planning to update our projections for like interest earned for the coming year that's more in line with the current interest rates?
So we look at, I guess, are you talking for projections or are you talking for budget purposes?
For projections, like just in this, like how we're so kind of over what we anticipate earning in terms of interest.
Yeah, so for projections, when you see the 2026 budget that comes out, there is an estimated column that's in there. So you'll see whatever our current estimates would be for the year. So we do factor it in at that point as kind of a marker. But I would encourage council not to change the budget itself, dramatically because this market of 5% interest rates is fantastic, but it's unlikely to be sustainable. So yes and no.
And then I assume we're getting on some of these WISC CDs that are at like 0.5% or whatever. I assume we're getting some other sort of benefit. Are those from that interest rate being so low?
So it's all based on the ladder. So how we do our investments is we have a CD ladder. So that we do mostly 3-year CDs, and then whatever the market is at that point, we take the best rate we can get. But then it kind of evens out as time goes on between the higher ones and the lower ones. So these would likely be ones that should be falling off soon. And then when we reinvest it, hopefully the market continues to be high and we'll reinvest it at that higher rate. But if not, it'll be whatever the market would be at that point. No other questions?
You have further updates?
I do.
Okay.
Yep. So the CIP, the mayor's proposed CIP, was issued last week, Friday, and we have our special finance committee meeting in 2 weeks. So that'll be the Monday before the regularly scheduled council meeting. This is where we hope many of the council members will come out. Each one of the department heads will be available, or their designee, to share with you what their requests are and answer any questions. It's really that information gathering stage for the CIP process. So don't feel like you have to read the whole document before those presentations. Part of it is for you to hear the story from the department heads at that meeting. And then budget worksheets went out last week as well. So we're kind of kicking off that part of it. And then we got our first payment from the DOT for our first 4 vehicle registration fees last week. So that money is starting to roll in as well. That's it.
Any other questions, Micah? Okay. I noticed later on in the agenda in the list of checks, I saw there's one for DocuSign, so yay. Which also got me to thinking, do you have an update on the search for the new payroll system and the new budgeting software? And will any of those things get our police department off of paper timesheets and onto electronic?
Yes. So the payroll process, one of the primary goals of that was to get the police department off of paper timesheets. So absolutely, that needs to happen. They had their 2 full days worth of discovery. So the top 2 vendors came in for a full day to kind of go even deeper into what implementation and the software would look like. And then they had 3 shorter demonstrations of the advanced scheduling people that submitted for that RFP. So at this point, we've heard from all the different vendors. Later this week, the evaluation team will be getting together to decide who they want to move forward with contract negotiations. So hopefully they'll come to terms easily on who we move forward with, and then implementation would start sometime thereafter. I'll say the project as a whole is moving quite a bit slower than what I had thought it was going to, and we keep running into kind of hurdles for that. But I still believe that taking our time and making the right decision is better than kind of pushing for something, because we do absolutely need to get the police department off of those paper timesheets. Once the payroll process is decided and that piece is implemented, at least mostly implemented, then we'll start looking at budget software after that. So it will not be for the 2026 budget. I'm still hopeful for the 2027 budget, but it all depends on when payroll can get upgraded. Because again, like 70% of our budget is wages and benefits. So my hope is we can use some of the information from the payroll software to help develop that budget instead of getting another solution that could do the same thing. So kind of want to make sure things are all working together. The other thing I'd like to report, I forgot from the last meeting, there was a question that I was going to report back, so if I can tack that on real quick. So it was asked what original projects were included in the 2019 debt issuance. And so there were 5 projects in the original purpose. So the fire station headquarters remodel was $400,000. McKee Road Phase 2 design was $296,000. Non-TID portion of Fish Hatchery Road was $1.8 million, and the TID portion of the Fish Hatchery Road was $4.2 million, and then Uptown Roads was $2.8 million. So that doesn't mean that that was the only amount that we borrowed for those projects. I may have borrowed it over multiple years, but those were the original 5 projects in that debt issuance, which then, as you know, got kind of moved around to meet the different spend down requirements.
Okay. Nothing else? All right, I guess we can move on to agenda item 5, review of bills. 5A is 2024 audit presentation by Baker Tilly.
It's under a weird category, but yep, that's where I'll put it so we can get Andrea to talk. So if you don't mind, I will kick it off, Chair. So Andrea Jansen is here she's the audit partner, and she's here to do the official presentation of our 2024 audit. It is in the packet, but then I also emailed it out to all of you guys as required under ordinance, and then it's been shared with the variety of people that it needs to be shared with. But this is a formalized step to present the information to you. Thank you, Andrea.
Thanks, Misty. Is it okay if I share my screen just to make sure that we're
Yes, please do.
all looking at the same thing? Okay, and then is it showing the ACFR, the annual comprehensive
It
financial
is.
report?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Thank you. So thanks for your time this evening to talk through the 2024 audit. And before we look at the numbers in detail, just a couple of high-level comments on the 2 formal audit reports. So the first being your financial statements or the annual comprehensive financial report. The piece of this report and towards the front section that I wanted to talk a little bit about here is the independent auditor's report. This is our opinion on the financial statements. Again, this year we were able to issue an unmodified opinion, otherwise known as a clean opinion on the city's financial statements. So that is the highest level of assurance that we're able to give and is, of course, good news. The other formal audit report that we issue is the reporting and insights communication from the 2024 audit. This document, if you're familiar with it, it's going to look really similar to prior years because much of the information in here is required communications. A couple of highlights from my perspective, internal control matters on page 6. Here we note that we did not identify any material weaknesses during our audit procedures. This includes not identifying any material audit adjustments. So while this is pretty standard here for the city, just a reminder that that is not all that common in the governments that we work with. It's a pretty high bar, and just a testament to the city staff and the internal control environment that you have in place at the city. So that should give you a lot of confidence in the information coming from the finance department. A comment just on the other comment and recommendation related to decentralized cash collections. This is more of a reminder for you. We didn't identify anything, to bring to your attention in this regard during our audit procedures, but just as you have more decentralized departments, there are different risks associated with that. So that is more of a reminder for you. And then just a general note that our contact information is also included in this document. So at any time during the year, you're welcome to reach out to any one of us on the audit team if you have questions or comments or want to chat through anything that you're seeing at the city. So we would welcome that communication. So then moving into the details from the year, we pulled together the 2024 financial highlights with some of the common ratios and things that we look at and some of the trends. So I'm going to start here with the general fund results, and we're looking at your fund balance or your equity. I actually like to start at the bottom of this chart here with your non-spendable fund balance. We're comparing 2024 categories in blue to last year in black. Non-spendable fund balance is just as it sounds. It's not in spendable form, meaning you can't use it necessarily to pay bills of the city. So that category decreased slightly to about $850,000 this year. That's made up of prepaid items and advances to TIP districts. Moving up the chart, you've got about 78,000 in restricted fund balance that's related to park projects and is pretty similar to last year. Assigned fund balance of about 12.9 million. Assigned fund balance is fund balance that you've earmarked for specific purposes. You can find the details of that on page 43 of the financial statements. Some of the bigger categories: employee retirements, carryovers, and 2025 fund balance applied. And that leaves you with just under $4.5 million of unassigned fund balance in the general fund. And this is fund balance that hasn't been earmarked for any specific purposes. And we'll take a look at that number more on the next page. So overall, landing at about 18.3 million in fund balance in the general fund at the end of 2024. Below the chart, we've got the summarized income statement. So starting in the middle, your final budget had a planned loss of about $4.7 million. So your actual results, net income of about $932,000 was certainly better than what you had planned. If you want to look at the details of that, you could find that starting on page 55 of the financial statements. Some of the highlights for the variance on the revenue side: investment income, and then there was savings in multiple expense categories in 2024, including general government and public safety were some of the larger ones. So moving on to the next page here, we are still looking at the general fund, still looking at fund balance. Here we're taking that unassigned fund balance of 4.5 million and we're comparing that to your policy for fund balance, which compares as a percentage of revenues. So we've got a few things mapped out here. The purple line is the Moody's target for the ratio. Your policy maximum is this dark black line, and then the minimum is at 15%. So you can see in 2024, you're just above the minimum in your target policy range. So that is good news. If we look over the last 5 years, certainly a downward trend here. But just a reminder that, 2020, 2021 with the COVID years, were kind of an anomaly where you were above your policy range, and really overall had a lot of municipalities had higher reserves in those years just because of the uncertainty. And so, the downward trend to be within your policy range is not overly concerning to me, but something to monitor. We would want to see you, remain within your range going forward.
Can I interrupt here for a moment?
Yeah.
So our policy has always been 15 to 25, or I don't know if it's always been, but lately at any rate. And we had just, gone back and overhauled our financial policies and guidelines, and we kept that range, right? So even though Moody's is targeting 30%, we're still okay with 15 to 25. Can you say a few words about that?
It's okay if I jump in, Andrea? Excellent. So yes, we rehauled our financial policy guidelines recently, and it was based on best practices. And I'll say there's a variety of ways municipalities look at what fund balance target should be, but that 15 to 25% is a pretty standard one that's used for municipalities. And then for the Moody's target, that 30%, they actually consider other categories as well. It's all levy funds, not just general fund. So hitting that 30%, we do, just kind of in another way. And if I can expand a little bit too about that relatively stark drop in our fund balance percentage, I'll say that is very intentional. The council has made decisions to purposefully and intentionally spend down that fund balance still within our policy on one-time things. So, we're spending, a lot of that was moving money over to the capital projects fund and then spending it on one-time stuff, but still within our policy. So while it looks like a very stark drop, again, it was very intentional, deliberate, and planned out this way.
Okay, Andrea, I think
Thanks
this
for
back
that.
to you now.
Okay, thank you. All right. So moving on, we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about general obligation debt. So mapped out on this chart on the top line, we've got your statutory debt limit, which is 5% of your equalized value. So we always, like to see that line trending upward, which is great. In the middle, we've got the city's debt limit. So your debt limit is 3% of the equalized value. And then the bottom line is your actual general obligation debt outstanding as of the end of the year and over the last 5 years. So about just under 61 million at the end of the year, which is 33% of your policy limit. Really no concerns here. The margin over the last 5 years is certainly growing, which is a positive sign here. And then below the chart, sort of just a reminder that you don't have any debt in your utility funds, which is somewhat unique for municipalities of your size. So certainly room to borrow if you needed to, but really no concerns here. And then we have included a link to the Wisconsin Policy Forum. There's all kinds of data out there related to debt, other municipalities within the state, and other metrics as well. So if you're into data, that it can be a fun place to explore. So on this next slide, we are still talking about debt, but we're talking about what you're spending on debt versus your non-capital expenditures in the governmental funds. So that ratio is 12.7% at the end of the year. That ratio is trending downward over the last couple of years and, slightly below your peer metrics that are plotted out on the black dots. There is a note below the chart that we've adjusted some of these for certain refunding debt and early payoff, these numbers haven't been adjusted, but the adjusted percentages are below in red here. So this would be a much smoother line if we were to have adjusted in 2021. Overall spend on principal and interest about 5.7 million this year, down from 2023 spend of 7.9 million. Moving along to the utilities. So first we'll start with the water utility results. As a reminder, there were new rates in effect for 2024. Those were approved by the PSC, which you can see has led to a slight uptick in the operating revenue, which is your top line. Operating income for this fund was about $599,000. One of the other things that we look at for utilities is your unrestricted cash reserves on hand, which you have about 5.4 million in unrestricted cash reserves for this fund at the end of the year. So you would be able to operate, in essence, about 18 months with those reserves. Those are all really healthy. That's pretty stable over the last 3 years. Your sewer utility had a slight operating loss in the current year, about $84,000. As you can see, the trend over the last 5 years, you're operating very close to the break-even point. Your rates are updated annually, so I would just say continue to monitor that and adjust as needed. Unrestricted cash reserves, again, here, slightly lower than what you've got in the water utility, but I would consider this also to be a healthy balance at year end. And then lastly, your stormwater utility results, I would say really similar to the story that we're seeing in the sewer utility with your operating results really close to being break even, though the rates were last updated in this fund in 2023. You've got healthy cash reserves again for this fund, and again mentioning no debt in any of these utility funds, which allows you some flexibility. So before I open it up for any other questions, just want to make sure to say thank you to Misty and the city's finance team for their efforts in preparing for us for the audit and just being responsive as always with our questions and additional requests during the audit. Things went smoothly from our perspective for the audit as a whole. So really appreciate the work that you do, Misty, and that your team does as well. Happy to answer any questions from your group.
Yeah, so I think the goal with our utilities is to try and break even every year, right? And so I think the sewer and stormwater curves look about the way they should. Is that correct?
You want me to take that one too?
Sure.
So the sewer utility in particular, yes, we'll have a very close margin because most of those costs are from MMSD and we just pass it along, right? So there's little risk of really high peaks and valleys. I hit my step goal just from talking with my hands. Really low risk of those peaks and valleys that we need to have, the extra cushion for. Stormwater is also a relatively small utility, so same type of thing. And it's an important utility that's there, but it doesn't have kind of that same requirements as what the water utility would have. Water utility is different in that it's a regulated utility through the PSC, and then it also cares a lot about the health and our ability to redo the infrastructure as it's needed. So while we want to basically break even, we still want to have a rate of return, which we talked about during that simplified rate case resolution a little bit ago, and we want to make sure that we've got the money to cover that depreciation so that when things do need to be replaced that they're able to. And just because there's so much volume of activity in there, we want to have a little bit more spread in order to have more flexibility if things come up in that utility.
Micah, any questions?
That was one of mine. So thank you. Let me, 1 second.
I guess while he's doing that,
go ahead.
I'll just note that we've got 8.6 months on hand unrestricted cash, which is pretty close to that 250-day cushion that we're looking for. Do we need to, and that's actually improved since last year, or since 23, I should say. Is there anything we need to adjust to make sure we have enough cushion there?
So a couple of nuances. One is the statistics that are provided in this presentation is a different base than what our policy is based on. I think ours is based on expenditures and yours is based on revenues, Andrea. Do I have those flipped? I don't remember exactly. So it's a slightly different base.
I thought BOSFI adjusted for that, but I did not go back to verify.
Okay. Either way, so looking at the stormwater and the sewer utilities in particular, there's much less volatility. So I don't know that we need to do anything at this point to adjust for it, but it is something that we continue to monitor to see if rate changes are important. And then as we go through the CIP process too, like are there big projects coming up that we need to be able to finance? I'm sorry, Andrea, if you wanted to answer that one too. I just jumped right in.
No, that was perfect.
Am I right? And so I'm looking at page 118 in the packet, 118 of 180 in the packet. Am I right in saying that basically this is the schedule of revenues and expenditures for like each department? Am I right in reading this that basically every department in the city spent less than their budget for the 2024 budget year?
Yes. Part of that too, though, is anything that was carried over from 24 to 25. There'll be a variance there. And then from a budget perspective, we always budget as though we're full staff because that's always our goal. So there's often will be staff vacancies in there as well. But the bigger difference would be the carryover piece of it.
No.
Okay.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thanks so much.
Wait, I do have one more, but Andrew does not need to. Do we have a Wisconsin Aerospace Authority? Like, that's one of the things that listed in the, like, things we're allowed to buy, but, like, we're allowed to invest in. And one of them listed was the Wisconsin Aerospace Authority. And I was like, I am not
That one I
aware
don't know.
of that existing. So, all right.
Andrea, any insight as we catch you on your way out?
I can't say that I've seen, investments in that, but if it's allowable, would lead me to believe that it is a thing.
All right.
Sounds a little risky. We won't be doing it.
Okay, moving on to 5B, detailed review of checks for $10,000 and above for the period of May 16th through May 31st, 2025, totaling $423,000 to $423,244.32. Any questions? Seeing none, I will move on to 5C, detailed review of all checks issued. Checks 128713 through 128782 for the period of May 16th through 31st, 2025, totaling $519,615.30. Any questions? Seeing none, moving on to 5D, detailed review of ACH payments for $10,000 and above for May 1st through 31st, 2025, totaling $674,452.81. Again, no questions. 5E, detailed review of all ACH payments May 1st through 31st of 2025, totaling $680,160.19. Any questions? Seeing none, we can move on to item 6, action items. Looking for a motion to approve resolution R6625, approval of new playground and swing set structures at Southdale Park.
Move to approve.
Okay, and
I can start it for sure. So when the town of Madison dissolved, the city of Fitchburg took over a portion of it, including the Southdale Park, and we inherited a playground structure that has seen better days. And so this proposal would be to replace that with a structure that's more aligned with what kind of our standards are. There's about $40,000 available within our current CIP that we could apply to this purchase, but then the other $75,000 we're proposing to come from the town of Madison funding. So when the town dissolved, whatever that net asset was, we got our share, City of Madison got their share. So we have an amount of money available that the council has said we want to use to invest in that area. So this seemed to be a great way to utilize some of that funds and get a better park for that area, or a better playground structure for that area.
questions? I noticed that all of the bids were nearly identical at $115,000. That seems unusual.
Not in park projects. They often will put what the budget is in the RFP document itself, and so then they will often come right at that dollar amount, trying to get as many amenities for us as they can with the funding that's available.
Okay, so they'll adjust whatever is in their offer based on what we say the budget is.
Exactly.
Okay. I noticed it said specifically encourage non-traditional equipment. What did any non-traditional equipment show up in these proposals here? I didn't notice anything that looked extremely unusual in the pictures.
This is a big question that I have too, because it's highlighted in the RFPs and has been for the last couple park playground structures, and I'm very interested in that as well. If we receive what we consider non-traditional, because I am very interested in non-traditional park structures.
Thank you. Please do.
You help me out. Why don't I help you out?
Perfect.
I think we have Deputy City Administrator Adam Sayre is currently overseeing the Parks Department in light of Scott Endel's recent retirement. And of course, we want to thank him for his nearly 20 years of service as our Parks, Rec, and Forestry Director. And I think we'll be taking a look at all the processes that we've utilized in the past and, determine if any modifications need to be made moving forward. How soon that will happen, I don't entirely know, based upon available staff capacity. And we're currently in the process of assessing that open position and whether or not any modifications to position description or city structure, those things should be considered before we would move forward with filling that vacancy. So I guess to really kind of bring this back to clarification is it's quite possible that we'll look at other ways in which we look to fulfill our park amenities and maybe begin to deviate from some of the more common setups that we've used in the past. I think an example recently is, I think it was Castle Bar Park that just came through the Common Council, where that's got a little bit of a different flair to it than some of our other parks. That could be perhaps an example of how we might look to move forward with more of our newer neighborhood parks, or whenever we're replacing existing structures, maybe looking at the available funds and trying to be creative on how we could potentially replace those existing structures as well. So, yeah, fair question and on the radar.
Great.
Okay, and then I had one last question. The resolution says that this park was not eligible to be funded by park fees. Can you explain a little more about that?
Yep. So there is more development in this park that is expected to be coming forward that will enhance the area as a whole, add new amenities, add more kind of features to the park. When you're adding new amenities or expanding a park, you can use those park fees that we collect from developers because that new amenity will be what that new development needs as far as park service. For this particular project, we are just replacing what's already there. So it's not driven because of new development that happened in the area. It's just replacing what was already there and caused by the residents that are already in the area. So this particular piece of the project is not eligible for that other funding source, which is very limited. But the rest of the project, when that comes forward for your consideration in the future, will be funded with park fees.
Okay, makes sense. If there's no further discussion, I'll go ahead and call the vote. All in favor of Resolution R6625, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. It is unanimous. Moving on, 6B. Looking for a motion to approve Resolution R9525, acceptance of Organics Management Grant Award and approval of contract with Sustain Dane.
Move to approve.
All right. Looks like maybe Tim is going to take this.
Tim's here. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you. The city was awarded $1,100 from Dane County Waste and Renewables through their Organics Management Grant Program. The awarded dollars are to be used to partially fund a contract with Sustain Dane to provide food scrap collection and organics management education at the Fitchburg Farmers Market throughout the summer of 2025. Sustain Dane will provide these services for 12 weeks for a fee of $9,960. Fitchburg Common Council approval is needed to accept the grant award and enter into a contract with Sustain Dane. A budget amendment is required to accept and apply the awarded funds to this expense and to reallocate $4,660 of funds previously approved for Fitchburg Star advertising. And then the remaining contract costs will be paid for with funds allocated for outreach and education. We're looking for council to accept the Organics Management Grant Award of $1,100 and approve the contract with Sustain Dane for $9,960. Then we would looking for council to amend the 2025 Refuge and Recycling Fund budget to accept the Organics Management Grant Award for $1,100 and apply the awarded $1,100 to this project. And then also have council amend the 2025 Refuge and Recycling Fund budget to reallocate $4,660 of fund previously approved for the Fitchburg Star advertising to this project.
And I will note that the Board of Public Works did not approve this. They voted it down 3-1. Didn't feel like it was a good bang for the buck, essentially.
Did I see on RCC that we're not, are we voting on this tonight? Are we not?
At Finance Committee,
No, I mean at council.
I think we're going to ask to bump it to the second meeting in June so that we can have the full council vote on it.
Okay.
Any questions?
No.
Okay. I can go ahead and call the vote. All in favor of Resolution R9525 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. It is unanimous. Moving on to item 6C, looking for a motion to approve Resolution R9625, acceptance of the Salt Reduction Grant Award.
Move to approve.
Tim, you want to walk us through this one as well?
Yes, thank you. The city was awarded a salt reduction grant through the Madison Metropolitan Sewage District Salt Reduction Grant Program. $2,154.75 was awarded to cover half the cost of a road salt calibration scale. The scale was purchased back in January 2025. So we're looking for council to accept the salt reduction grant award.
Any questions? Okay. I'll just note that we got a little more description from Ben Schulte at the RCC meeting last night. And the trucks are fairly intelligent. These things are calibrated to deliver a certain amount of salt per lane mile, and you can adjust that based on the weather conditions, and it'll automatically dump more or less, and then it also automatically adjusts itself based on the speed of the vehicle. So it's, I guess they try and be as precise as possible, which is pretty good. If there's no other discussion, I can go ahead and call the vote. All in favor of Resolution R9625 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. It is again unanimous. And finally, item 6D, I'll entertain a motion to approve Resolution R9725, amending the 2025 Capital Projects Fund budget, reallocation of 2024A debt proceeds.
Move to approve.
Misty.
Thank you. I will say I have never talked about arbitrage so much as I have in the last 6 months, but we are coming up on the 1-year anniversary of when we issued our 2024 debt issuance, which was bonds. Which was notes, which does have more flexibility than bonds, but we still have to spend 45% of it within the first year in order to hit the spend down requirements and avoid an arbitrage rebate. So proposing about $1.9 million worth of funding swaps. So for example, in the streets resurfacing project, we have levy property tax money. In the police facility, which as you know has been delayed and why we aren't hitting our spend down, has borrowed money. I'm going to take that borrowed money out of police facility, put it into streets, take the property tax money of the same amount out of streets and move it to the police facility so that I can demonstrate that we spent the 2024 debt issuance within the timelines that are allowed. This resolution does not change how much is allowed to be spent on the projects. We're not changing the overall budget. We're simply changing how that budget will be funded in order to meet those requirements and then ultimately allow the city to retain the interest money that we're collecting on those borrowed proceeds.
Yeah, I'm just going to repeat that, and just so that for everyone knows, just this does not affect the budget for the police station. It does not affect our ability to pay for the police station, and it does not affect the current, I guess the amount we would borrow to complete the police station. It's just a movement of money to satisfy these requirements.
Exactly, and it's a one-for-one swap. So everything going forward is exactly the same as before.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. If there's nothing else, I will call the vote. All in favor of Resolution R9725 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. It is again unanimous. All right, moving on to item number 7, announcements. Our next Finance Committee meetings will be Monday and Tuesday, June 23rd and 24th. These are our special finance meetings where we have presentations for the CIP, the Capital Improvement Program.
Plan usually.
Plan.
So just Monday is the special meeting. Tuesday the 24th is our regular meeting.
But it's the other half of this. That'll be, oh no.
Nope, we just do CIP in one night. budget we do
Interesting.
over 2 nights.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned at 6:15 PM.